Hello everyone. Welcome to our video on functions. This is just an introduction to the idea of what a function is. So functions aren't really a difficult thing to understand if you think of them more like a math machine. So we're just going to think of it as a math machine, which when you feed in a number, it always gives you a predictable single output. So I've built this machine here. We're going to name it. We'll call it the f function. And this machine here takes numbers, they go in this end, and they come out this end. So it changes numbers, or it might not change numbers, but the point is that when you put something in, you know what's going to come out. There's a rule to it. So if I put in a 3, for example, and a 5 comes out, okay, that's a set of inputs and outputs. Now in math, we usually call inputs x, and we can call outputs y, but in this case we want to say that it came from the f machine, that was the machine we used. So we can call the outputs f when x goes in. So this one here is 3, and this is equal to f of 3. So let's think about another number. Maybe we feed in a 6. Okay, and when we feed in a 6, out comes an 8. So we feed in a 6, and then f of 6 becomes 8. So now you can kind of see that there's a pattern to this, and if we knew all the possible outcomes followed the same pattern, then we could tell you what the machine does, but in algebra. So we could say f takes any number x, okay, and you take that x and you just add 2 to it. Okay, so now if we wanted to think about things that are functions and are not functions. So let's start off with this one here. We've got a number 1 gets fed in and it spits out a 4 or it spits out a 6. Okay, so you feed in a 1 into our machine and two different things can fall out. Now that means this is not a function, because it doesn't have a predictable outcome when you feed that 1 in there. So when we look over here at this one, when you feed in a -1, it always gives you 6. And when you feed in a 0, it always gives you 12. And when you feed in a 1, it always gives you -11. When you feed in a 2, it always gives you 14. And when you feed in a 3, it always gives you 8. This is predictable, right? And even though we can't really come up with an easy rule for this, because each one of our allowable inputs gives us one output only, we call that a function. So this type of math machine always gives you a predictable outcome. Okay, so let's think about whether these ones are functions or not, okay? Now, think about any of our inputs. Again, we usually call that x. And our outputs, which we on a graph, we almost always call y. So if we take any input, let's say at 2, right there, let's see what it gives us. So we go down here, and right there it feeds us an output, right there. So this would be our output. So let's just call this x1, and we'll call this y1. So if you think of our table of ins and outs, when we feed in an x1, it always feeds us y1. Okay? We don't even care what the numbers are, really. We just care that when you put in an x1 here, it spits out this. If we go somewhere else, let's call this x2 here, it spits out over here y2. It spits out y2. And no matter where we chose to do that, it would all work. You can see that there's no place where we put in an x value where it spits out more than one y value. So we're going to go ahead and call this one a function. Okay, when we go over here, let's just think about this spot here. Okay. So when we feed in x1, same thing happens. We get that one there. We get y1 there. y1 there. So feed in x1, get y1 for this input and output. But what about if we choose this spot here and we call that x2? Well, think of all the different things that you could get. If you go here, you could be there. This could be our y2. But this could have been y2. Or up here, this could have been y2. All of these could have been y2. So x1 doesn't give you or x2, sorry, doesn't give you a predictable y2. So we don't know what that value is going to be. So this is not a function. So this is not a function. Okay, it doesn't give you a predictable output for every input that you try. So let's think a little bit about whether these are functions. Okay, so these are just equations. And we can think about what we get when we put numbers in. So if I just put a number in right there, let's say. So there's our input spot, right? I'm going to put a number in there. And then this is our out, because usually y is indicating our out. We're just going to check and see what we get. So we get y equals, let's put a 5 in there. 3. So we'll put a 5 in there. And that's just our choice, right? Just like it was our choice where to look on that graph. So if we do 3, this is going to be 25. We're still going to have to add that 5. So 25. And what do we get? We get y equals 75 plus 5. So y equals 80. And I'm just going to think of that process. Is it predictable that when you square a number, you only get one number? Can't get two different numbers when you square a number. So if you square this, you get a predictable out. So then you're just adding, and that's predictable too. When you add this, you're always going to get this number. So because putting in a number gives you only one thing out, this is a function. So we'll call this a function. Okay, let's look over here, remembering that this is our in and this is our out. And I'm just going to pick a number. So again, I'm going to make this one, let's say 5. Actually, let's make it 25. So if x is 25, what do we get for our output? Okay, we still have equals y squared over here. So when we write this in, when we write this in order to solve for what this is, what numbers could you square to get 25? Well, there's two possibilities. You could square minus 5, or you could square positive 5. They both give you 25. And because they both could give you 25, that's two possible outputs for the input of 25, which means this is not a function. Okay, so that's our idea of what a function is. A function is something that takes any input and gives you a predictable output for it.